Hello, friends. I hope this story finds you with a pocket of quiet and a warm cup of tea in your hands. For 3 days, shiny oranges stole every customer and left Miss Diep's jar empty. Then one silver-haired woman cut the perfect fruit and found it dead inside. If you enjoy stories like this, please like this video and subscribe. Today we'll explore a different kind of battle, one that isn't fought with shouting or angry words. It's a silent war between wax and soil, between the shiny, quick illusion and the rough, slow truth. You remember our new neighbor down the road, don't you? After he realized that lowering his prices wouldn't break Ms. Diep's spirit, he changed his tactics. He figured out what the modern world does so well. It sells a feeling, not a fact. And he also figured out what the modern world is weak to. We love things that look perfect. On a Tuesday morning, he took down his sale signs. He didn't need them anymore. Instead, he installed bright LED lights that glared even in the daylight. His fruit looked transformed overnight. Those oranges on his table weren't just fruit. They were like jewels, impossibly orange, glowing, smooth as glass. Not a scratch, not a speck of dust. When you walked past, your eyes stuck to them the way your eyes stick to something shiny in a shop window. Here's the first uncomfortable question. When something looks perfect, do we ever stop to ask what it cost to look that way? Miss Diep stood at our bamboo gate, holding her old woven basket. She looked at his display. Then she looked down at her own harvest. Our oranges wore the marks of the wind. The skin was textured, slightly rough, with the occasional brown spot where a bee had visited or a leaf had brushed against it during a storm. They had a dusting of natural white bloom on them. Standing next to the neighbor's perfect fruit, ours looked like a tired farm wife standing next to a movie star. "Mom," little Nye asked, staring at the neighbor's lights. "Why are his oranges so shiny? Ours look old." Miss Diep didn't answer immediately. She picked up one of our rough oranges and held it gently. "That isn't the fruit shining, honey," she said softly. "That is a raincoat." "A raincoat?" Nye asked, her brow pinched. "He has coated them in wax and chemicals," Miss Diep explained. "It's a trick. It makes the fruit look like it was just picked for weeks, even if the inside has already died. It's makeup for a corpse." Now that's not a sentence you forget. It sits in the air like a warning. So here's the paradox. If you can see the lie clearly, but everyone else loves it, what happens to your truth? For 3 days, we watched cars slam on their brakes. We watched people, tourists, city folks, flock to the shiny table. They pointed, they admired, they bought bag after bag. They judged with their eyes, not their common sense. We heard them say, "Now this is quality. Look how fresh it is." And the neighbor would smile his salesman smile. Meanwhile, our gate felt quieter than it should have on a good week. Our jar on the kitchen shelf sat empty, and that emptiness isn't just missing coins. It's missing proof. It's the feeling that you can work honestly and still be unseen. The fear that perhaps the world has moved on can creep in quietly, and it can make you doubt things you used to know in your bones. I saw Ms. Diep pick up a cloth, almost tempted to wipe the natural bloom off her oranges to make them shine. Her fingers held the cloth the way you hold a risky idea, half ready, half ashamed. Then she stopped. She put the cloth down. "I am too old for tricks, James," she told me. "I am like this fruit, rough, weathered. If they don't want the truth, I cannot sell them a lie. Let me downshift for a moment, because there's a kind of courage that doesn't raise its voice. Ms. Diep wasn't trying to teach a lesson to anyone on the road. She was deciding what kind of person she could live with in the mirror. She could have chased that shine. She could have tried to match the neighbor's illusion. But she chose to keep her hands clean of it. And that brings up another question. When the world rewards the shortcut, how do you keep choosing the long way without feeling foolish? While the neighbor was busy polishing his peels, Ms. Diep did something no one on the road could see. She went back to the garden. Women of her generation have a specific kind of patience. They know you cannot cheat nature. The neighbor used growth stimulants to make his trees produce fruit faster. He was borrowing from the future to pay for the present. It looked smart at first, the way credit cards look smart before the bill arrives. Ms. Diep chose to pay her debts to the soil. We spent those days in the back garden, not glamorous days, quiet days. Ms. Diep taught the children that the soil needs to breathe. She mixed soybean husks and ash into the earth, feeding the roots. There were no bright lights here, only the smell of damp earth and the sound of the hoe hitting the ground. This is the invisible competence the world often ignores. The wisdom earned through decades of sun and rain. You don't see it from the road. You don't clap for it. But it's the reason a tree can keep giving without collapsing. The tree is like a mother, Ms. Diep told Anna while turning the soil. She gives everything to her fruit. If we force her to produce without feeding her, she will give us hollow children. Anna listened while the soil turned dark and soft. Nye watched, quiet now, as if she was trying to understand something bigger than oranges. Let me offer a short recap before we reach the turning point. The neighbor tried to win with LED lights, wax, and speed. Ms. Diep answered by going deeper into the garden, feeding the roots, and refusing to polish a lie. One afternoon, Nye ran back from the gate, worried. "Mom, the neighbor told a customer his oranges last for 3 months. He said ours will rot in a week." That's the kind of claim that makes a child panic because children hear rot and think bad. Ms. Diep stood up, wiped sweat from her forehead, and looked at her daughter with a serious, loving gaze. "Nye," she said, "do you know why food rots?" "Because it's bad?" Nye guessed. "No," Ms. Diep corrected her. "Because it is alive. Real food knows how to wither. It follows the law of nature. It is born, it gives life, and it returns to the earth. Anything that stays shiny for 3 months is not food. It is a decoration. I do not sell decorations. I sell life." There's your answer to that earlier question about the long way. She didn't argue with the neighbor's claim on the road. She didn't try to out-talk him. She taught her child the rule that would outlast both of them. Now, here's a micro hook to hold on to. If real food proves it's alive by changing, how do you prove you're real in a world that punishes change? Ms. Diep proved it the only way she knew, by continuing to care for what was living. She kept working the soil. She kept feeding the roots. She kept letting the fruit be honest. She didn't hurry the tree or dress it up. She trusted the slow truth, even while the road chased shine. And yes, those days were hard. The neighbor's stand was busy. Our gate was quiet. The jar stayed empty. But Ms. Diep's hands did not move toward wax. They moved toward earth. The test finally came on a Sunday morning, and it didn't come from us. It came from a customer. a woman with silver hair and a sharp, discerning face. She looked like someone who had cooked for a family for 50 years and could spot a bad melon from across the room. You know the type. A woman who doesn't get dazzled easily because she has fed too many people to be impressed by packaging. She stepped out of a nice car and walked straight to the neighbor's flashy stand. She was carrying a bag of his perfect oranges that she had bought the day before. The neighbor smiled his salesman smile. "Back for more, ma'am?" The woman didn't smile. She placed the bag on the table with a heavy thud. "I didn't come to buy," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "I came to ask." Here's the question that breaks illusions. When you've been fooled, do you swallow it to avoid a scene? Or do you demand proof, even if people stare? She pulled a small paring knife from her purse. Right there, in front of the LED lights and the watching crowd, she took one shiny, waxed orange and sliced it right down the middle. There was no juice. The sound was dry, like cutting into styrofoam. The inside of the fruit was white, crystallized, and completely dry. It was what we call granulated, the result of a tree pushed too hard with chemicals. "Is this what you sold me?" she asked, holding up the dry halves. "A pretty stone?" the neighbor stammered, face turning red. That must be a bad one. Let me replace it." He grabbed another shiny orange and cut it open. This one had juice, but the moment the knife pierced the skin, a sour, fermented smell hit the air. It smelled like old wine. The fruit was rotting from the inside out, trapped beneath that airtight layer of wax. The crowd went silent. People looked down at the beautiful fruit in their own hands. You could almost see their thoughts shifting. If it can rot under shine, what else have I trusted just because it looked good? "It shines on the outside," the woman declared, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "But it is dead on the inside." And just like that, the war between wax and soil turned. Not because Ms. Diep shouted, not because we argued, because one customer refused to be polite about being fooled. Now let me call back to our opening, because this is where the story tightens like a knot. For 3 days, wax stole the road and left Ms. Diep's jar empty. Then that knife cut the perfect fruit, and the lie showed its dry heart. The silver-haired woman left her bag on the neighbor's table and turned away. She walked across the road toward our quiet bamboo gate. Ms. Diep was sitting there, cleaning the dirt off our rough-skinned oranges, her movements unhurried, as if she had been waiting for the world to remember its senses. "You," the woman said. "Let me see yours." Ms. Diep stood up. She didn't boast, she didn't brag, she simply handed the woman a knife and a small, scarred orange. The woman cut it. Snap. That sound was crisp. Juice sprayed into the air, carrying the sharp, sweet scent of real citrus. The inside was a deep, rich gold, heavy with nectar. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. The woman tasted a slice. She closed her eyes. I watched her shoulders relax. It was the taste of memory, the taste of fruit before the world got so fast and artificial. "This is it," she whispered. "This is what I've been looking for." She looked at Ms. Diep with a shared understanding. "Give me 10 pounds, she said. "And don't pick the pretty ones. Give me the ugly ones. I know that's where the sugar is." Now here's the answer to that earlier micro hook about proving you're real. Ms. Diep didn't prove it with shine. She proved it with a crisp snap, with juice in the air, with a taste that brought someone's shoulders down. By evening, we had sold everything. We didn't need neon lights. We just needed the truth and a knife to show it. Recap again, because it matters. The neighbor's illusion looked unbeatable until someone tested it. Once tested, it fell apart in public, and the rough, living fruit won the day. Across the road, the neighbor sat alone. His lights were still on, but his stand was empty. He looked small, defeated not by us, but by his own shortcuts. And if I'm honest, there was a moment when I thought, well, that's what he gets. But Ms. Diep surprised me. Here's a question for the older heart. When you've been hurt and then proven right, do you choose victory or do you choose mercy? When the sun went down, Ms. Diep took a bag of her best oranges, the ones she had saved for our family, and walked across the road. The neighbor looked up, defensive, expecting her to laugh at him. Ms. Diep placed the bag on his table. "Take these home to your children," she said gently. "Don't feed them that stuff you're selling. Sell it to strangers if you must, but don't give it to your family." "Why?" he asked, voice shaking. "I tried to put you out of business." Ms. Diep didn't raise her voice. She didn't rub his failure in his face. She answered with the kind of calm that only comes with age. "You can't put me out of business," she said, "because I don't sell oranges. I sell the time I spent caring for the tree. You can buy wax, but you cannot buy time." That line landed like a bell, not loud, clear. Then she walked back to our little house. And as I locked the gate that night, I thought about all of you. We live in a world obsessed with being young, fast, and shiny. It's easy to feel like Ms. Diep's oranges, weathered, scarred, overlooked. It's easy to wonder if being real is still enough when the road seems to reward polish. But remember what happened. The value wasn't in the shiny skin. It was in the sweetness inside. The neighbor could buy wax, but he couldn't buy time. Ms. Diep's hands had been in the soil, and that time showed up when the knife came out. So don't be afraid of your wrinkles. Don't be afraid of being old-fashioned. Those are signs you have lived a real life, exposed to sun and wind. Let them have their wax. We will keep our roots deep in the soil. Good night, friends, from our little hill to yours. For 3 days, the road chased shine and left our jar empty, and it hurt to feel invisible. Then a silver-haired woman asked one honest question, and her knife answered it. The perfect fruit was dead inside. Ms. Diep never shouted. She kept her hands in the soil, fed the roots with soybean husks and ash, and let real oranges look real. Rough, weathered, alive. By evening, we sold everything, and the neighbor sat under his lights with an empty stand. Still, Ms. Diep carried him a bag for his children and said, "You can buy wax, but you cannot buy time." In a world that worships shine, keep your roots deep. Let the knife reveal sweetness, not emptiness. Don't fear being old-fashioned. Those marks mean you lived and your soul stayed real.